and I heard something that sounded very much like a whoop. Hello and welcome to SquatchBot.com. I'm Darrin Smith, and I hope that all of you out there are staying safe and that you and your loved ones are well. This global pandemic that we are experiencing is absolutely taking its toll on so many. I now know a number of individuals who have either been hospitalized or bedridden for long periods of time as a direct result of this virus, and unfortunately I am sad to report I now know a number of individuals who actually passed away as a direct result of COVID-19. So I absolutely encourage all of you out there to take this situation seriously and to take the needed precautions you need to take to keep you and your loved ones safe. Right now, we are out in the field and we are in very close proximity to where I had my encounter last March and where I discovered that nesting site. I'm very anxious to get up into that location to continue that investigation of the area because I'm absolutely convinced that that's where the Sasquatch are hunkered down right now as they're making their move down this ridge line. And after discovering those 17-inch footprints in the area last week, I am absolutely convinced of it. However, the roads leading up into those higher elevations are still impassable due to the snow. And I used to live in South Lake Tahoe, and I'm very familiar with driving in snow. However, even with the tire chains on the vehicle, it is still impossible to access those higher elevations. So I am down at these lower elevations, searching the area for any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch have started their move down the ridgeline. As I mentioned before in previous videos, at least in my area, I've discovered that the Sasquatch tend to hang out just below the snow line, and they'll eventually move down into those lower elevations in search of food. So this definitely makes it a strategic time for us to be out in the field investigating. And unfortunately, there is a huge storm that is approaching, and it is guaranteed to drop a ton of snow up in this area, which is going to make this whole mountain inaccessible. And I'm a little disappointed about that because these roads leading into the area are not cleared of snow. So once this storm comes through, I think this area is going to be pretty much off limits for our investigation. And that's why I've definitely made it a priority to get up here and to continue our investigation of our area, of this area, because as I mentioned, after discovering those 17-inch footprints last week, I am convinced the Sasquatch are in the area. And with the limited hours of daylight that we have to work with now, I think it's important that we get at it. Though definitely not one of the most popular times of the year to be out searching for Sasquatch, I think winter is actually one of the best times of the year to be doing so. I think that the Sasquatch tend to move around a lot during the winter months, and I think it has to do with their seasonal migration as they move down from those higher elevations down into those lower elevations in search of food and shelter. So I think as researchers, this definitely creates an opportunity for us to kind of anticipate the Sasquatch's movement patterns and maybe be able to narrow our search parameters. Also, the snow makes a perfect medium for which to find that physical evidence that we are searching for, those footprint impressions. As I mentioned on previous episodes, the forest floor generally does not have a medium for which to find those footprint impressions that we're looking for. The ground is just so littered with so much pine and forest debris that it's really hard to find those impressions that we need to really make a definitive identification of a footprint track. However, the snow offers a perfect medium for which to find those footprint impressions. So that definitely creates a strategic advantage for us as researchers. Also, there's not a lot of people out in the woods this time of year, so it is quiet. It's exceptionally quiet. In fact, even with the parabolic microphone, you don't hear a lot of sounds coming from the forest this time of year, and that is really a strategic advantage, because if the Sasquatch are moving through an environment, they are going to be making a lot of noise as they step on this snow and ice. And when using a parabolic microphone, you definitely can hone in on the location of a Sasquatch as it moves through a forest. So that is just another advantage for kind of conducting your Sasquatch research this time of year. And as I mentioned, the Sasquatch tend to hang out just below the snow line there. So if you could kind of find out where the snow line is and where the food sources are, the Sasquatch need an incredible amount of food. So definitely be keeping that in mind when you're conducting your search. And also I found that the Sasquatch really move into close proximity to those forest communities and homesteads. And I think, again, they're looking for food. So any places that have orchards or any sort of crops or animal food sources, definitely be keeping those in mind when you're kind of narrowing your search parameters. So definitely not the most comfortable time of the year to be out searching for Sasquatch. However, I do think winter does offer some strategic advantage for researchers who are out searching for Sasquatch. I spent a considerable amount of time in the area, searching for the physical sign the Sasquatch were around. However, I did not find any tangible evidence to indicate that they were. Earlier this morning, I was tipped off by a local who had had an encounter on the backside of this ridge, an area I have yet to investigate, so I decided to pack up my gear and head over in that direction. As I journeyed towards this new area of interest, I encountered an area heavily damaged by fire. I have mentioned numerous times on previous videos my belief that the Sasquatch will very likely avoid these burnt-out areas because of the lack of overhead canopy or heavy vegetation for which to hide in. And by noting these burned-out zones in relation to the surrounding forested areas, you can significantly enhance your search area targeting, and oftentimes you can discover very narrow corridors or choke points that are the perfect locations to set up surveillance. After I parked my vehicle, I began the long trek into this new area of interest, and as I hiked in, I was suddenly stopped in my tracks by an abrupt sound, a sound that may indicate the Sasquatch are in the area. Okay, I'm going handheld, but I was just moving into this area and I heard something that sounded very much like a whoop. Came from over in that direction there. So that was really interesting. Coming into this area, this new kind of expansive area within the forest. It's much more open in this area, and I could see that there had been recent, well, there's been fire damage. I don't know how recent it has been, but this whole area is a little more open. There's a lot of trees on the ground, so clearly a fire had pulled through here and kind of eliminated a lot of the tree cover. So this whole area within the forest is a lot more open. And as I moved into the area, I heard that really, that single sharp whoop. It was loud, and it was sharp, and it was an abrupt. And oftentimes when the Sasquatch are moving around in a family unit, I do think they post sentries up in strategic locations to kind of keep an eye on the area. And they very often will make a vocalization when there's an approaching threat. And I think that's absolutely what happened last March when I encountered the Sasquatch at that higher elevation there. As I pulled into the area, the Sasquatch on the top of the embankment let out a very loud vocalization. And I think they do this to either kind of deter you from entering the environment, but I also think they're doing it to warn the other Sasquatch in the area of the approaching threat. So that was very interesting, moving into this area and hearing that potential vocalization. I haven't come to any conclusion of what had made that sound. I have been monitoring the area for a considerable amount of time now, and I haven't come to any conclusions that the Sasquatch are in the area, but the sound was definitely interesting. Though I'm not convinced they are Sasquatch tracks, I did find some intriguing impressions measuring roughly 13.5 inches heading up the embankment that were intriguing and encouraging for me to continue my search of the area. So when you're out and about and you're conducting Sasquatch research, the most valuable resource that you're going to have are going to be the locals within those mountain communities. And I absolutely guarantee you that if you are in prime Sasquatch habitat, you're going to encounter locals who have either had an experience themselves or know somebody who's had an experience. So I definitely encourage you guys to be communicative with the people that you're encountering during your research. And I also mentioned that wearing Sasquatch apparel will definitely start off conversations quite frequently. In fact, today, as I was driving into this area, I stopped off in town to run a couple of errands, and I had acquired 2 very credible Sasquatch reports, and one of which came from a very reliable source. And she was telling me that her and her husband were camping in very close proximity to where I'm located now. And they discovered the next morning that the things in their camp had been moved around. It didn't look like something a bear would do when they come in and push stuff around and knock stuff off tables. But it did look like whatever this creature was of size. It was definitely large because some of the objects that had been moved around were rather heavy. And this had to be done in the dead of night while they were asleep in their tent. So there have been numerous reports of Sasquatch coming into people's camps in the middle of the night and poking through their coolers and kind of investigating the stuff that is there. And we have a number of reports up here in the California Sierra Nevadas of Sasquatch actually being spotted doing this. So I found this report very interesting, and I've actually come over to that location where this incident occurred. And looking at the map, what I find very intriguing about this particular incident was that it's coming from the backside of a ridge that I've really been focusing a lot of my efforts on. So I absolutely understand why we were getting Sasquatch activity on this side of the ridge line. It just made sense. There is nothing more frustrating than a missed opportunity to capture some Sasquatch evidence, and I'm speaking specifically about their vocalizations. Oftentimes, as researchers are moving into an environment, if there's a Sasquatch in that area, they're going to let out a very loud vocalization, alerting the other Sasquatch in the area of the approaching threat. And if you don't have that audio recorder recording to capture that initial vocalization, it's not likely that you're going to capture any audio evidence, because the Sasquatch generally goes silent after that initial vocalization. And you saw last March, as I was pulling into that area to park my vehicle, the Sasquatch at the top of the embankment let out that very loud vocalization, and it was absolutely heartbreaking not having an audio recorder recording, so I did not capture the sound. And just now, as I was moving into an environment, I heard what sounded like a possible whoop, but I have no way of confirming that because I didn't have an audio recorder recording. So it's very important that if you're going to be out, especially moving around in an environment, to have your audio recorders recording at all times. And what's great about these new audio recorders is you can have them recording for long periods of time before their memory cards start to fill up. And you see the audio recorder that I have on the monopod there. I just put it on the monopod and stick it in my backpack, and I can leave this recorder recording continuously for well over 24 hours before it starts filling up its memory card. So really there's no excuse not to have those audio recorders recording, especially if you were moving into an environment where there may be a Sasquatch situated, because you absolutely want to capture that initial vocalization. Now, another piece of equipment that I think is absolutely invaluable for a Sasquatch researcher is the parabolic microphone. And you know how these work. It has a very sensitive microphone here on this bowl, and as sound comes into the bowl, it gets amplified, and this very sensitive microphone can pick up that sound. And what's great about the parabolic microphone is it can hear extreme distances into the forest. So you can come into an environment and sweep the area, and if there's a Sasquatch in the area, you are going to pick it up on the parabolic microphone. And if the Sasquatch is moving about, they're going to make a lot of noise as they move through the forest, especially if they're walking on snow. But even if the Sasquatch is stationary and is sitting somewhere, they oftentimes will make some soft cooing sounds or whooping sounds, and you can absolutely pick that up using a parabolic microphone. And what's great about it is it definitely narrows your search radius considerably, because now instead of having to explore this entire environment, you can come into the environment and you can listen, and the parabolic microphone is going to tell you if there is a Sasquatch in the area, and it's also going to pinpoint the Sasquatch's location. So for a Sasquatch researcher, I have to say the parabolic microphone is one of the most valuable pieces of equipment you can have. So this is kind of cool. You see this kind of dug out area here. There's actually quite a few of them around. And what this is squirrels will hide food caches to get them through the winter months. So they come down and they will dig up their caches, and it's food that's going to help get them through the winter months. For those of you who have been following my channel, you know I brought this up on a number of occasions already. My concern over the disappearance of the 54-year-old woman up here in the Sierra National Forest. For those of you who may be new to my channel, a 54-year-old woman has gone missing up in the Sierra National Forest under very mysterious circumstances. They discovered her camp on 4th of July weekend ransacked, and they discovered her vehicle a short distance away crash in a ravine. What was very unusual about this particular case was the fact that this woman had been spotted twice moving through the forest in what was described as a dazed state and barefoot. However, she was still able to elude search and rescue teams. And I don't want you guys to think that I'm the type of individual who would put the Sasquatch abduction stamp on any missing persons case in a forest. In fact, it's quite the contrary. I've done a lot of investigation work on the missing person cases within the Yosemite and surrounding area. And though some researchers would say that the clusters that they're discovering of missing persons is an indication of possible Sasquatch activity, I absolutely disagree with this. In fact, I know a number of individuals in the emergency services and search and rescue teams, and these areas where these supposed clusters are showing up, there are a number of environmental anomalies in these areas that make them incredibly hazardous, and it happens frequently throughout the year. Search and rescue teams have to go in and rescue individuals that were able to call for help, and there's a lot of times where individuals will go into the forest and have a mishap and they'll never be seen again. So I definitely don't think that the Sasquatch are, running around abducting people. However, the situation in this particular case has raised some red flags that definitely has me concerned. In fact, I mentioned before that I am open to the idea that the Sasquatch may have the ability to use infrasounds to create emotional anxiety within us, or even alter our perception in some way. And just the fact that this woman was discovered out of character, moving through the forest in a dazed state and barefoot was very unusual. And also the woman was moving between the two sighting reports. She was moving in a direction that I anticipated the Sasquatch to be moving to get up to those higher elevations during those warmer months. So there are definitely a number of red flags here that does have me concerned for this woman's well-being. She still has not been discovered, and the creek fire that erupted in September has just recently been extinguished, and it had burned through that area. So I do hope that that woman was at least able to escape that inferno as it pulled into the area. So definitely a concerning case, but I did want to bring it up to you guys here because you had asked me a couple of questions, being which, how are they able to rule out wild animals or humans as a cause of the ransacked camp? And they were able to rule out wild animal based on the damage that was done to the camp. There wasn't a lot of claw marks or tearing that would be evident of a bear was the cause, and they didn't see any sort of tracks that led them to believe that this damage was done by animals. And the other cause being humans, they weren't sure it was done by a human either, because there were valuables there that were not stolen. In fact, the woman's purse was there with all her money and credit cards and her identification. That's how they were able to identify her so quickly. So this case is still underway, though the search and rescue teams have been scaled down quite a bit. They are still active, and it is definitely a case that I am paying attention to, because I do think the mysterious circumstances for this woman's disappearance definitely raises some concerns that the Sasquatch may be involved. "2020 was an absolute challenge for so many. With the current health crisis, economic hardships, and the stay-at-home orders, it was difficult to maintain constructive focus and optimism for the future. However, one positive outcome of it all was my ability to spend more time in the field conducting Sasquatch research. During my investigations, I discovered new areas of interest, had a life-changing encounter, and collected some concrete evidence that the Sasquatch are roaming our forests. My May 3rd encounter was absolutely extraordinary, and I feel it is very well documented, with the audio and photographic evidence collected during the initial encounter and the physical evidence I discovered on the follow-up investigations. In its totality, clearly demonstrates a Sasquatch encounter. I absolutely acknowledge that much more evidence is needed to irrefutably substantiate this species' existence, and although I am passionate with my search for answers, it is not likely I will be the person to deliver that evidence. I am not supportive of killing one of these creatures, and unfortunately a specimen will be required to validate their existence. However, I am going to continue my search for this elusive creature, and for the time being, I am going to continue posting my discoveries on YouTube. I enjoy sharing my research with enthusiastic supporters and respectful opponents within the Bigfoot community, who are willing to engage in constructive, open-minded discussion on topic. However, unfortunately, as of late, I have noticed a trend within this forum that I find incredibly disheartening. Besides the frequent hoaxing and spreading of disinformation, many of the prominent figures within the community are very rigid and opinionated about their beliefs, and are extremely self-serving. Unless you're on the in, there doesn't seem to be a constructive collaboration among researchers, and coupled with the ever-present troll and their constant onslaught of hate, the whole endeavor of sharing information and research discoveries is very one-sided and unfulfilling. I do very much appreciate all of you who have watched my videos, subscribed to my channel, have hit the like button, or have dropped me a kind message, and to be completely honest, it is the only thing that keeps me motivated to continue my pursuits. Producing these videos takes an incredible amount of time, energy, and financial resources, and it's helpful knowing the endeavor is at least being appreciated. We've made some amazing discoveries in 2020. I absolutely believe we encountered Sasquatch last March, and I'm very confident I discovered a nest site at that location. I have been able to map the Sasquatch's seasonal migration patterns in this region of the Sierra Nevadas. I have made some invaluable connections within the communities of the various areas I am investigating, and with the impact of the various wildfires in the area, I am confident the Sasquatch's movement patterns are going to be easier to predict. As the COVID crisis continues, work is scarce, which means I will very likely be spending more time in the woods in search of these elusive creatures, and I very much appreciate having all of you along with me. Let's make 2021 the year of discovery. I'm Darrin Smith, and I'll see you here next time at squatchspot.com.